to expand the role of certified peer specialists across the state. So that's kind of how I'm going to break my things down. So that's how we'll get going. So anyway, when we talk about recovery, many states, the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, along with many states, including Wisconsin, have adopted recovery-oriented behavioral health services. And that has caused what I would say is a real dramatic shift in expectations of outcomes for individuals with mental health or substance use who are seeking treatment or services. It's now looked at today that individuals with mental and or substance use disorders, that they can actually have the beliefs that they can recover and they can manage their conditions successfully. That's kind of a different change in paradigm from what it used to be even 12 years ago. And again, the value of recovery and recovery-oriented services is basically sets a parameter that change is possible with individuals, and they can improve their health and their wellness, that they can live self-directed lives and strive to reach their full potentials. That, to me, was really intriguing and stuff because it really fits in with IL philosophy as well. Recovery-oriented services and independent living philosophy, to me, are pretty much the same. Self-empowerment, self-direction, moving forward with your great potential, and they're also based on person's strength. So that's kind of the parameter of what is recovery. There's 4 dimensions of recovery that are recognized. One is health, being able to overcome or manage one's disease or symptoms. For example, if you're a person who uses has a substance use disability, it's really being able to abstain from using alcohol or illicit drugs or prescription meds, and being able to make informed and healthy choices that support your physical and emotional well-being. Those are a lot of words that come off of SAMHSA, but again, I think when we talk about peers and peers providing these kinds of things, it really is being able to support another person and share your experiences that might help somebody move forward and see that they can move forward in their own lives and recovery. The other thing is people should be able to have a stable and safe place to live. So often, historically, many people who were experiencing mental health or substance use disorders, they often had unstable living places to live. They had a hard time maintaining employment and different things. So building that stability is so important to help a person work on their recovery. Purpose, again, having meaningful activities such as a job or volunteering or family caretaking or other creative things really help the person to stay in recovery and move forward with their recovery. To be active participants in the community are really key things. Again, I think oftentimes people with these types of disabilities often end up isolated or not participating actively in their communities. So again, I think a peer can support somebody in researching and participating in some of these types of activities. And again, building a community for individuals or with individuals, developing relationships and social networks that can support an individual in their recovery and help them maintain their recovery. So those are kind of some of the core principles under recovery, and I think the big key piece in using a peer specialist and support in recovery is that there's hope. We build in hope with people with these types of disabilities that they can move forward in recovery, they can build on their strengths and their talents and their ability to cope, and develop a really good, strong relationship. So again, those are really core principles. I really smoothed over them, but if you want to find some of that information, you can go to SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and they have a wealth of resources and knowledge is there for anybody who wants to research more and learn more about recovery principles, about the use of peers. So it's a great resource.
Hi, Dee. This is Mary. Just to pop in, I was wondering if maybe you could speak up just a tiny bit or move closer to your phone.
Okay, sorry about that.
Well, you're great. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to move forward now and kind of talk about my experience in Wisconsin. I came to my center director position in 2008, in which the center already had a contract with the state Department of Health Services, Bureau of Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery. And what that contract was for was to develop basically peer, to develop kind of the core principles and practices around peer specialists and the use of peer specialists in service provision for people with mental health and substance use. At the initial stages, we worked a lot with a core group of peers or people who identified with mental health as their lived experience and really developed some core documents to use, like the Code of Ethics for a peer specialist. I'm trying to think, core documents, yeah, ethics, the competencies that we expect every peer specialist to be able to do in their role as a peer specialist, and things. So the other thing that we were asked to do is to develop a certification process. And what that meant was develop a way of training individuals and testing individuals to see if they met the competencies needed to hold a certification in Wisconsin. We were able to complete that part of the project. In 2010, we started testing certification exams across Wisconsin for peer specialists. And at the beginning, we only started with people who were providing services to people with mental health disabilities, as far as a peer support program or a purchase service through a Medicaid program. Since that time, we have grown and expanded and done a couple of other things. We have, I should go back up. We were initially started this project based on an employment initiative of people with mental health disabilities, as they were a highly underemployed population, and the state happened to have some Medicaid infrastructure funding within Wisconsin that was used a lot to do the development and promotion of the use of peer specialists across the state in programs that provided services to people with lived experience in mental health. So that's kind of how we got there. It was really started out as an employment initiative. In 2010, we started testing individuals, at which time it grew pretty quickly. And about, I'm just going to give you a little history here, at about 2014, we started seeing some variability in how people were testing and how many were successfully passing the certification exam. We had a few theories as to why that was happening, but ultimately when we looked at all the data, we determined that it was some flaws in the different types of curriculums and the trainers that we were using. So we developed a new curriculum just based for Wisconsin to train peer specialists for both mental health and substance use, and that curriculum was just completed last year. We also look to the centers to do a couple of things for us. One is they are our exam sites across the state. We have 8 centers here in Wisconsin. We work with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee to run an online exam for certification. And so the centers here in Wisconsin are our proctor sites at which people go and take their exams there. We just had an exam yesterday in which across the state we tested 140 individuals across the 8 centers. So that was the biggest class we've ever had. The other thing centers are very much utilized for is they coordinate all of the peer specialist training, and I coordinate with the 8 centers all the peer specialist training that goes on across the state. The centers are an integral part of this infrastructure in order to make sure that everybody across the state is going to have access to peer specialists and training. So that's how we utilize them here in Wisconsin. The other big component for centers, because again, I think provision of peer specialists is not that far off from what we do in independent living, but many centers, and in fact I think all centers right now currently employ peer specialists on staff. Some just use that as a value-added bonus for the people that they work with, but many of the centers here in Wisconsin have developed fee-for-service activities around the provision of peer specialist services under some Medicaid programs here in Wisconsin. So I'm going to stop there because I said a lot to see if there's any questions, and then we'll move on.
Oh, great. Thanks, Dee. So again, if you have questions, press *# and I can open up your line, or go ahead and type them in the box and we'll voice them for you. Oh, I see somebody has a question. All right.
How long is certification for? Is that the one you're seeing?
Go ahead, please.
I see the one question, how long is a certification for? Our certification lasts for 2 years, and then they have to recertify it every 2 years, and they have to have at least 20 hours of continuing education. That's very, but it's identified what types of education, in what categories they need to have continuing ed in, and then they submit that to the university for recertification.
Great. And then I also see, what areas are they tested in? Did you just answer that?
Well, the areas that they would test in, our curriculum teaches to the core competencies of a peer specialist, and there's going to be a website that we'll put up later. It's called www.wicps.org, where you can find all the core documents about being a peer specialist, the competencies, the ethics, all those kinds of things that you can look up and see all those things that we have developed here in Wisconsin.
Great. Go ahead, please, caller.
Yes, what was your curriculum based on for the peer training certification?
Our curriculum is based on the competencies that were developed and identified from Wisconsin. That was a core group of peers, people from DHS, Department of Health Services, a variety of some practitioners, and we work diligently on identifying the competencies needed to be a certified peer specialist. What do you need to know in order to deliver those services? Again, those competencies are identified on that website that I just gave you.
Could you give me that website one more time? I didn't get Adobe Flash Player, which I'm on the call. For some reason, it's not working on my computer.
Okay, and I know it's on the back of Kathy's presentation that she's going to put out later, but I can say it one more time. www.wicps.org. CPS.
PPS?
C as in candy, P as in Paul, S as in Sam.
Okay.
Got .org. Okay.
And also, I'll just let you know that those are on the slides, and also the transcript from today's call, and those slides will also be on our website. So, but sorry, go ahead, Dee.
And so if we're okay with that, I want to move on to how do we start doing some systems change within your own state. Are there any more questions?
I don't see any other questions at this point. Folks are wondering, is that website active now?
Should be.
Great. So again, if you have questions at any point, you can press *#, and I'll be able to know that you've got that question or type it in the box. But otherwise, go ahead and take it back away, Dee.
Thank you. So I think a couple of things. In states where maybe you're seeing, I know in Wisconsin we saw early on in 2000 around that maybe we as centers weren't serving people with mental health diagnoses or substance use at a level that we needed to be. So again, recognizing that and doing something about it are, things is why we do systems advocacy. So I think in your states, one thing is you really need to find out what is going on in your state for the delivery of mental health or substance use services. What is their behavioral health services that they provide? Who gets access to services? Are they limited? Are they peer-based? What is going on in your state? You need to find that out. The second thing is there are, in most states, I believe in all states, there are mental health councils, mental health and substance use committees that your Department of Health Services probably have, or the Governor's Council, or a variety of things, that it's helpful to get a seat on those committees, because there you find out more about what is going on, who's being served. Are there opportunities to change the system? Are they looking to develop some new practices within behavioral health services? And it's also an opportunity for people at that table to learn about independent living and independent living centers. I don't know about you, but in Wisconsin, many times we continue to be the best kept secret. People don't look at us as working with people with other types of disabilities other than physical disabilities. Oftentimes they don't recognize that we work with all disabilities and all ages. So again, I think it's an opportunity to educate many of those players at the table to share the independent living philosophy, which is so close to this peer support piece that we do here in Wisconsin and in many other states. And again, those committees have power. They can make recommendations to the State Department of Health Services. They can make recommendations for what they think maybe the state budget should be, and maybe some initiation of programs. I know those councils here in Wisconsin have had a great influence on the development of the peer specialist program. They've had influence on developing peer respite programs and other types of mental health initiatives here in Wisconsin. I'm assuming those kinds of structures exist in other states. If you're not where the county or where the state seat is, getting on your local county committees. Your counties probably have other advisory committees or other things that are going on that you can become more informed about what's going on and what is needed in your local regions that you serve. Again, having an idea of what is going on is going to help you shape what you can do moving forward. I think, again, because we come from an independent living philosophy and the peer movement in mental health and substance use are so aligned, I think it's been really easy, and Kathy will correct me if I'm wrong later, but it's been really easy, I think, for centers here in Wisconsin to kind of embrace the peer specialist movement and to say, this is what we do already for, most of the people that we serve. It just has really become an opportunity to develop some fee-for-services, to expand into some other realms, as Kathy will talk about. They're doing some drop-in centers. They've done some work with a lot of homeless people, and there's a variety of other opportunities that I think can be developed and worked on. So, again, using those recovery-based services is such a core belief, I think, within the independent living movement. Other things that I have centers for that I use, I mentioned, I'm going to give you some core things they do. So centers right now with our contract, as we've moved out, they are our testing sites. They coordinate the majority of our trainings for peer specialists. They actually have on-staff trainers of the peer specialist curriculum. I'm trying to think. I think those are the core things, and they've also developed streams for fee-for-service that they build through Medicaid programs or county programs. And as we move forward here, we're also in the process with state Wisconsin Department of Health Services and Bureau of Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery, as well as Children's Mental Health Services, in the development of what we call a parent peer specialist certification, which will run very close to what we're doing as far as curriculum and training and testing. But the unique role of a parent peer specialist is for an individual who is in the parenting role of a child or young adult who is experiencing mental health, substance use, or other behavioral disorders, giving them support and helping them to navigate the complicated systems that many children and families find themselves in when they are experiencing those types of issues. So that's something that we will be rolling out very soon. So again, I will take questions.
Great, thanks, Dee. So again, you can join that queue by pressing *#, and then you can also type it in the chat box for us. And I did just want to let folks know that I did just update the April website, and so it also has the website there speaking of and the resources that folks will be referring to for today. So again, go ahead and press *# or put your question in the box if you have them. I don't really see any right now, Dee. Why don't we go ahead and move forward, and we'll let folks kind of think about some questions.
Sure. I'm going to mute myself, so there you go.
Oh, actually, I do have one question.
Oh, okay.
Like, from Rolling Start.
I don't see the question.
Oh, I just opened up his mic, but you're asking how long does this one last? Are you wondering about the conversation? It actually, we're going, and it's a 90-minute conversation. So we'll be done at 3 Mountain. Yeah, no, 2:30 Mountain. Sorry, I gotta get my time zones all right. Oh, the certification. He's wondering how long the certification lasts.
As long as you continue to recertify every 2 years and get your continuing ed, it could last indefinitely. Our certification costs $50 to take the exam, and every 2 years to do the recert, you would have to pay $50.
Great, thank you. Great, and that's all the questions for now.
Great, I'm going to mute myself.
All right, and so we're going to turn it on over to Miss Kathy. And Kathy,
Hi.
were you still going to go ahead and do the slides, or do you want me to do them?
Yeah. No, I'll do the slides if you get them. They're not up yet. So
Great.
there we go.
Oh, there you go, right here. All righty, go ahead.
Great. I do want to respond to Dee talked about getting the independent living centers involved in working with folks with mental health, and I do disagree with her. I think it took a long time, and I was surprised. I'm very proud of all the centers in Wisconsin now. I think all but one has at least one peer specialist on staff, but it took almost 10 years for this to happen, and I feel like, what the heck? It shouldn't happen. It shouldn't have taken this long in a state that has as much going for it as Wisconsin does as far as our coalition is concerned. So, but now I'm past that and really want to talk about why centers need to figure out if they need to do a better job working with folks with mental health and substance use disorders, and if they want to get involved in the systems change issues that Dee is talking about. For us in Wisconsin, everybody has to do a 704. So I keep wondering, look at your 704. And I pulled out my 704 from 20 years ago, and we served 11% of the people we served identified as living with a mental health issue. In our last 704 that we just did, 44% of the folks that we serve reported that they live with a mental health issue. Now, in Wisconsin, managed care is the way long-term care is provided for folks now. But they did a study, and between 65 and 70% of all the participants in long-term care have a coexisting mental health issue. And our long-term care is only for folks with physical disabilities and for seniors. So it's that disability that is often really ignored when a person gets into the system. I also feel like we really need to stress cross-disability. When we first became a center, there was a big push about not being a single disability center. There was a lot of them in the country, and we were lucky. We just started out serving folks with mental health issues, and we had some staff that self-reported that they had mental health issues. The other opportunities is that it's been a great fee-for-service for our agency. As Mary said in the introduction, this fiscal year, we're going to generate about $311,000 in fee-for-service just for mental health services, not just for adults. We really took a leap 4 years ago and decided that if we're going to change how the world looks at mental health, we need to start with kids. And so we started working with children and want to have them be a much better educated adult so that they don't have to go into the system as an adult. And the other thing is, it's really the right thing to do. There are still really terrible things happening to people, not just in institutions, happening in the community, happening all over the country, in particular in our criminal correction system, has become like the biggest provider of mental health services in the country. So one of the things I think a center really needs to do is to, oh, I went the wrong way, sorry, Mary, is to get a sense of what happened historically in this country. and I guess in Wisconsin, I was a young adult in the 70s when this all happened, but institutions were closed. Some states fought to keep theirs open, in particular mental health, but in Wisconsin, they closed most of them and kept three large state institutions, but a lot of private and small ones were closed. And with this promise that community-based services would be provided in people's communities, and that never happened. And so lots of people were put on the street, and hundreds of thousands of people across the country ended up in a different institution, and that's our prison system. And many of them either have passed away in that system or are still there. And now there's not much hope of them being very successful if they would ever be put back in the community. The lack of community-based alternatives started to change in the late 80s, and there are lots of really wonderful, I think, creative options out there. I feel like the people are still stigma. I didn't even put that on here. It's something we deal with every day, and because a lot of our staff are folks that self-identify with a mental health and substance use issue, and the stigma that goes along with that is so different than any stigma that is connected to other disabilities. If you have had a stroke, you're a person who deserves support and are treated with great compassion, and that doesn't necessarily happen with folks who have mental health or substance use issues. The thing, Dee talked quite a bit about recovery and the IL philosophy. That was sort of the light went on for us when a long time ago, and I'll get to that, we were asked to get involved in helping consumers be more involved in one of the counties we serve to help them change the mental health system. And we just could not believe how compatible recovery and mental health services are, or recovery and IL philosophy are. And again, Dee talked about it. It's consumer-driven, strength-based. One of the things she did mention is a lot of centers where you're always telling people to tell your story. And I think so many folks with mental health and substance use issues have never been encouraged to tell their story. And it's a really powerful way to get people to understand what people are going through. I feel like folks really don't have a voice yet. We work a lot on self-advocacy with people that we serve here to make sure they understand that they are not their diagnosis and that they have a voice. And if they want change in their lives, that they can be the driving force to make that change. We also work a lot with folks. The independent living movement, one of the core services is skill training. And what has happened for as long as I can remember, in the 60, 70 years I've been around, is that people looked at folks with mental health issues and felt that their future was hopeless, that they weren't able to learn, that it was a waste to try to give them a skill set, that they couldn't work, and they couldn't be parents, they couldn't, it just went on and on and on. And I believe that in the IL movement, one of the things we work a lot with people is that we want to instill hope. That, and so many folks that come to us, they're just so smart and have so many skills, and no one has ever acknowledged that in them. And it really makes a difference when you start to do that. So I want to go through, and again, Dee went through a lot of this. I won't go through it again, but I think it's really important to understand that recovery is a real personal thing. Recovery doesn't mean the same thing for everybody, and it is really about the whole person. And again, that's another connection to the independent living movement. We just don't do one thing for a person and then kick them to the curb. If there's other things in their lives that they need assistance from us, we do it. And so recovery is about healing all aspects of a person's life as much as they can, and learning. So many folks don't even know what their personal diagnosis means. They know how they feel. They know what their symptoms are, but they don't know when you talk to somebody about, people say to me, well, I have schizophrenia, and I'll go, yeah, okay. What does that mean to you? And you hear about how that diagnosis has affected their life, not necessarily, they have a hard time with housing, they have a hard time working, those sorts of things. And those are all things that we help other people with other disabilities work on. And so I feel like a center, like the perfect place to team up with folks with disabilities, with mental health disabilities. And I really feel strongly that when you start to think about being person-centered and strength-based, people are just shocked sometimes, or if you ask them what they want, people go, what? What are you talking about? I've never, ever got to make a decision about anything in my life since I was hospitalized. And I feel like that's something, again, the independent living movement could really, really work on, is helping people tell their story and identify people's strengths. One of the other issues here is to this is sort of a touchy one, and if we want to take ask for questions after this one, I would appreciate that. How many of your ILC staff self-identify? And it's something that I guess I get calls from centers all over the country about mental health services, and when I ask if they have somebody on staff that has self-identified, they go, well, no. And I would bet my next paycheck that there's somebody on staff that has a mental health issue or a substance use issue, and they have just been unwilling to share that because of the stigma that goes along with the diagnosis. So we really need to take a look, and this I've talked about this a couple of different times, and I think this was one of the hardest things in just our own house here in Wisconsin was, what's your agency culture like? Is it accepting and supportive? Does it accept every disability? I have been in centers where I ask about, working with folks that have real chronic mental health issues, and I get a resounding, hell no, there's a place for those folks. We send them down the street. I've heard that if someone comes in and they're homeless and they're dirty and they smell and they might be really, really hungry and distracted when they come in, and I've asked what centers do for that, and the biggie is like, well, we send them down to the shelter, and they don't follow up, they don't see them again, and to me that's just a huge, huge disservice to the disability community, because they are our brothers and sisters, no matter whether people want to accept that or not. And so taking a look at your own house, your own center, what kind of language is used when you talk about mental illness and substance use? Are there accusations about, and comments about druggies and about people coming to work under the influence and, really detrimental comments about people who are mentally ill? It's not tolerated here at this center, but I have been in other centers where it's acceptable language. And no wonder people don't want to self-identify if that's the case. And then, if I talk to people in your center, I keep wondering what would they say to a stranger that they might not disclose in their own center, in their own site. I really feel that if people know that their environment, we always talk about here when people sometimes don't want to talk about things, and we really make sure they understand that it's a safe place. And what that means here is no one's going to judge you. You need to tell us how you feel, what's going on here that's making you uncomfortable, or what can we do to help you be more productive at work if you're easily distracted or something. Those kinds of things need to be conversations that happen at your center. Does anybody want to have any questions right now?
Thanks, Kathy. So again, you can press *# or the little dude with the hand up or chat box question here. I did want to say somebody from Rolling Start Inc. in San Bernardino, California says a good percentage of their staff identify with some form, they said.
Excellent. I mean, then you know that they're working in a safe and accepting environment. To me, that tells you what's going on. If your center then has folks who identify, then you need to identify, what do I know about peer support? And I just have to tell you, when we developed peer support before it was a thing in Wisconsin. In 2006, we brought a trainer from Arizona and trained 4 or 5 of my staff, and it changed our whole organization. Did somebody have a question?
Yeah. So Kristen Williams is wondering. She says, "Wow, $311,000 in fee-for-service. What type of services exactly?"
We have several different contracts. We have a crisis intervention contract in La Crosse County for working with families whose children are exhibiting some mental health symptoms, and the families don't necessarily think or want to be connected to the county service system, or they may not qualify because they have their own health insurance. And so we go in and we get in that household and help things calm down. Sometimes it's the child, and they are angry and upset, and things are happening to them they don't understand. And so we spend lots of time with that child, helping them try to figure out what's going on with them. And if indeed they're depressed or have, what I consider the new a huge disease in this country, which is anxiety, that a great deal of youth experience. And sometimes it's the family unit. Something's not clicking in that family unit. So we get $50,000 a year to do that in one county, and that's a fee-for-service. Then we do what we call CCS, Comprehensive Community Services. It's a Medicaid reimbursed skill training. Only the skill training has to be based on helping people understand their symptoms, understand their mental illness, develop coping skills. What we train on, and we do a lot of other skill training. We do cooking and, the kinds of skill training we have always done, but we do it with mental health in mind. So, and then we have an advocacy grant that's called Consumer Affairs Coordinator, and that's to provide advocacy for individuals who are in the mental health system so that they understand that they have control over their services and their plan. That's a great one. And I'm trying to think. I think we might have one. And now we do CCS in 7 counties. We used to do it just in La Crosse County, and we provide comprehensive community services in 7 counties. And we get almost $60 an hour to do that. And some counties pay us because we're in a real rural area once you get out of La Crosse County. So once, we might be an hour and a half from a county that doesn't have a provider, and they want the peer specialist provider. So they will pay us to travel there also. So it's worked out really, really well for us.
Great, Kathy. I have just a couple more questions, if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine.
Let's go to the phone lines. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, my name's Olivia, and I am an independent living specialist here in Illinois, and we kind of sort of cover all phases, including people who have mental illness, but there's nothing here. We can't even get the housing authorities to even talk to us so we can get the federal grant money that's there for them. And I see a lot of these people that sink deeper into a depressed state, and they almost become invisible. And I worry constantly every day for these people. And I wonder how we can make it better for here.
Well, I can hook you up. If you call me after this call, we have a homeless coalition, because what we were seeing is about 90% of the folks in our region that were homeless had a mental health and or a substance use diagnosis. And the homelessness and suicide rate in our community is really, really high. And we have 2 coalitions working really hard. But one of the things that we end up doing, and sometimes it is difficult to find housing for folks, but people absolutely cannot be denied public housing simply because of their diagnosis. You have to file complaints, and that's what we do. But we're really past that, because we have a huge homeless coalition here that has opened up the doors to public housing here like we've never seen it before. It's been an amazing change in their attitude about people's rights. There was all sorts of discrimination going on in our housing system here, not just in La Crosse, in a lot of our counties. And I'd say we've helped overcome that maybe in about half of the counties that we serve. And we just continue to file complaints, document that people are being discriminated against, things that people say, and we make sure staff go with them when they apply. Because people are much less willing to say things in front of a staff person. So it's a lot. We do a lot of housing here, and that's, with our IL funds, and that's probably one of the biggest areas in employment for discrimination.
Thanks, Kathy. That's great. And what I'll do is I'll throw your phone number for your center down in the chat box if you're okay with that.
Oh, I'm fine with that.
Great.
Just you won't get an answer today because we have to leave right away today.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. And so moving on to the next question here, Gary Arnold is wondering if a center is displaying evidence against stigma, I think he means if they're showing that there's a stigma against mental illness at their center, do you have any recommendations for some good awareness training?
Well, I don't know what's available locally. I would have you contact your NAMI if you have a NAMI there, or some sort of mental health association. The best thing to do is to bring in the folks in your own environment. I mean, we do it. We do training all the time. We do mental health first aid training a lot just to help the public understand better. But, getting folks in to talk about it, and hopefully it's someone with lived experience because they can talk directly about it. So I would go to any consumer group or, like I said, NAMI, to see if someone can't come in and talk about stigma. In your own center, though, it's really hard. I've got enough staff. I've got 22 peer specialists, so I get called out all the time if there's comments made, if there's things going on in our environment that they don't think is trauma informed. And then we have a little work group that goes in and corrects it. A lot of it depends on the hierarchy of your organization. And if it doesn't start at the top, I don't know that it's going to be successful. It's going to take longer. That's some of the resistance that I felt in some of the centers here in Wisconsin, is that the top didn't accept it until they understood it, and the staff made a plea for it to happen internally, and showing them that it's okay to hire someone that discloses that they have a mental illness.
Kathy, and then I also just threw down in the chat box NAMI. It's NAMI, the National Alliance.
The National Association. Yeah, National Association for the Mentally Ill. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then I also threw in the bottom there, if your area has a Youth Move program, they're also really great about talking about young people. They're young people themselves. And then, sometimes if you're more rural, your mental health centers might have what they call like a LAC, like a local area, or do you know what they stand for?
No, I don't.
It's basically like an advisory council for mental health programs, and they're all people with lived experience, and sometimes they'll do awareness presentations.
Right. And you got to ask till you find somebody. And if we had folks around here who really wanted to tell their story, and somebody said, oh my God, they're going on and on and on and disclosing a lot. Well, we worked with them and helped them figure out how to tell their story so it was powerful and effective, and how to write about their own story. So I really think that it's not any different than us encouraging other folks with other disabilities to tell their story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I just wanted to say again, Dee, if you have anything to add, your mic is still live as well. I do have two more questions. One is, again, from the folks in San Bernardino, California, and they're wondering who would be a good place, or where would be a good place to start, or who do they need to contact in order to begin looking at working with the county to get fee-for-service contracts or to start doing some of these mental health programs?
We went right to the mental health department of La Crosse County Human Services, and it depends. You're in a larger area. It might be a little harder to find out who you go to. Around here, sometimes there's one person that you talk to. That would be the director of human services in some of our rural counties. But if you go to find out what kind of services do they have, you might find out that they're already doing something like comprehensive community services. It's a federally funded program. It is funded by Medicaid. So I can't imagine, and it might be something, do your homework and find out if your county's interested, because in Wisconsin what happened is our governor is picking up there usually is a 60-40 split in Wisconsin for Medicaid reimbursed services, and the governor, the legislator passed a bill to pick up 100% of the Medicaid services for CCS, and this is Wisconsin's response to a lot of the, unfortunately, a lot of the shootings and the mass murders that have been happening around the country, is to really soup up mental health services.
And the other thing is, and I don't know in your state, but I know here in Wisconsin, Wisconsin has received a lot of funding with the opioid epidemic that's going on.
Yeah.
I can't believe that's not happening in other states. Anyway.
Oh, it is. Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of funding out there. There's a lot of people leading their charges. At least here in Wisconsin, they're training both recovery coaches and actually providing them peer specialist training so that they can actually go to ER and meet with people. That's one of their things. But they also might be a good resource in other states about how are we serving this population or other substance use. So you might want to see what grants your state has and what grants your county has as far as services, and just maybe having some informal chats with people from your county or whoever you're, about what kind of services, how do people access services, are they limited on the amount of services, can they only get this much service and then they're done? I mean, you really need to understand the system.
Yeah. Here in La Crosse, we were a pilot. We were asked to be part of a pilot, mostly because of our IL philosophy, to be a pilot for CCS. And now we spend time educating other counties. We know so much about CCS. We've been doing it for 11 years here, 10 years.
And that's a particular county that's extremely progressive.
Yeah. And so, but other rural counties, we're telling them things that we've learned here, and it's been really nice. It's really opened them up to us, to also then be a provider in their county. So is there other questions? Otherwise, I'll move on.
Yeah, I just have one more. So Emily Shaw is wondering. She's wondering, at our center, all disabilities are kind of lumped together. Should there be a specific program or group just for consumers with mental illness?
Okay, well, I'm going to talk about that, because the next slide I have is your center ready to provide peer support or other mental health services? Now, we don't have like separate programs. We have fee-for-service, which is CCS, and a lot of other. That also includes, we provide mental health services for folks that are part of DVR. Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. We work with children, and so I guess we could talk about what your center wants to do. What are you good at? Because that was the thing that we needed to sort of find our niche. What we found out is we were really good at skill training and learning how to make our skill training recovery focused really endeared us, I think, to the county, and really working hand in hand with counties to make sure you have an open line of communication, that we really bumped heads with La Crosse County a lot, because we'd hear things like, well, we sent a person over and here's their goal. And it was pretty obvious that their outcome or their goal wasn't anything that they would not say, I need to accomplish this. They just wouldn't have. And so we push back a lot, and we still do. So when we get a referral and we meet with the consumer and they're not very invested in their outcome because the county social worker decided that's what they needed to work on, then we also provide, we always tell people, you pay us for fee-for-service, but what comes along with that is advocacy. We do a lot of individual advocacy for individuals in the mental health system. I don't know if I answered your question.
And actually, right along with that, is there a title or position someone holds that would be able to help us with fee-for-service in a county?
Again, we contract with the mental health division of the counties, all 7 counties. We have a contract with their mental health services department.
And this is Dee. You know, we call our mental health service for peer support. It's a comprehensive community services. Your state may have it. It might be called something else. But if you go to program descriptions, it will tell you what you can bill for and what some of the titling is for different jobs, you know, different services.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, for example, if you have if you're a peer specialist but you don't have a degree, you get one billing. The county can bill for one rate. If you have a degree, you get a bill for a higher rate. If you're have a degree and you're a peer specialist, you get a higher rate. I have a couple staff people here who have their master's degrees, and so the county can bill a really high rate for that. It has to be somewhat connected to mental health services. So if it's social work or therapeutic rec and those sorts of things, then the county really benefits from that. Our independent living specialists, they're the folks who provide all the IL services, provide a lot of our fee-for-service, but we also hired what we call community-based skill trainers, and they are all peer specialists. And we have 6 or 7 of those. 6, I think. So.
And I just want to clarify one thing. At least in Wisconsin, and I think this holds true across other states, a peer specialist or a peer support person, whatever they call them in different states, must be a person who identifies with either lived experience with mental health or substance use.
Substance use, right.
Or co-occurring. So
right.
I just want to be clear about that.
Yep.
Know, having a degree in mental health stuff doesn't qualify you to be a peer specialist unless you have that.
Nope. Nope. Have to be a person with lived experience. And that's this next slide that I have. You know, we have developed a self-assessment tool. Hello?
Hello?
Yep. I was just getting a tiny bit of feedback from you, Kathy.
Oh, okay.
And actually that assessment tool is up on the April website now. And I'll drop that link in one more time on the chat box.
Okay. And this is all about whether you're ready to start this process. If a center is already got folks on staff and you want to figure out how to start getting them trained, to me, we weren't even thinking about charging anybody when we started training folks. We trained people because it was what people, consumers that were coming to us, that's what they wanted. They wanted someone who was a peer who had the same lived experience as them. And so we had 5 or 6 trained before the state of Wisconsin even started training people. So, and again, it made us a much better center. It made us much more aware of, I think, of what really was going on in our center. I mean, we had to change a lot of our policies, and we had to be what's called trauma informed as an organization, because they're finding that trauma is at the base of about 80% of not only mental health but a lot of substance use. And so we don't want people to come to us either as a consumer or a staff member and be re-traumatized at work. And so, and that's probably one of the things that's really, really hard to maintain. We work at it. I probably have to work at it the hardest here because I'm loud and a touchy-feely kind of person, and a lot of times that's not what people want. And I have to like be on high alert constantly to make sure I'm not offending somebody. So, and then you have to decide as an agency, again, we're back to this issue of starting at the top. Is your center willing to make changes? if you're answering the questions honestly, and if your administration is answering questions and then you get down and there's 3 different sections to the assessment tool, if your staff are saying, oh my God, I hear people saying this and that, why would I ever tell people that I, live with major anxiety? Instead, I just take sick days and don't tell people what's wrong. If that's going on, then it needs to be noted. Somehow you have to get people at the top of your administrative system to listen to you. And then we're back to the role of trauma. I didn't realize sometimes I was traumatizing people because I'm loud, and it can come off being really aggressive, and so that's not what I want to do with folks at all. And so I am on alert constantly and checking. I do a lot of self-checking with people to make sure I haven't offended somebody or caused them any kind of anxiety in their interactions with me. And I think that's something I've had to learn to do, and not just me, other folks in our organization. And so it's like, is your organization willing to make those kinds of changes? The next thing that I think is so important, and believe me, it's probably the most important thing next to your center being ready, is to have excellent supervision of the folks that are peer specialists. I don't care. My assistant director is a peer specialist. We have a coordinator who supervises other staff that's a peer specialist. We have independent living center staff that are peer specialists, and we have skill trainers that are peer specialists. We run a drop-in center, and all the staff there are peer specialists. So having folks who really get it, who understand. And it doesn't mean people aren't supposed to do their jobs. We do that dance every day here, making sure that people understand that we understand what they're going through, but that then we need to either have them take time off if they're having a difficult time, or help find some sort of accommodation for them so that they can do their job. I feel, though, like a good supervisor is compassionate, and they allow people to be who they are. They help people find their strengths and use their strengths. One of the hardest things, I think, and this is something, if you've ever had, I can't think of it. Dee, can you think of the name of the training where you really, microaggressions, where people really need to identify what their own personal biases are. Oh. Now, we do it around mental health, but we've also done it around race and gender issues, to really help make sure that your organization is really accepting and supporting everybody that comes to you. One of the huge crises that we've been having around our area is the number of suicides that we're having. And unfortunately, a lot of that happens with youth who are having a tough time with gender identification, or if they're transitioning. Those kids are so at risk, and it just breaks my heart, because there's wonderful, wonderful children that are taking their own lives because they couldn't figure stuff out and weren't connected. It's one of the things the county is putting some pressure on us. They want us to get even more involved with the folks that we're not connecting with, because a lot of the folks who commit suicide in our region are not part of the service system, and but they want us to do it for free, and we are so busy. Unless we get money to hire more staff, that there's just no way we can do it. And then, are you providing a safe, supportive, and inclusive environment for your staff? watch what kind of language you use. We really try not to use the C word, which is crazy. But it happens. It's part of our American culture. It's used to identify a lot of different things. And so we work really hard to try to find alternative language when we talk about things that are going on in the world. And there is always the chance that things aren't going to work. If you, you know, we've hired the wrong peer specialists. We've hired folks that we were willing to give a chance, even though they didn't have much work experience. Some worked, some flourished, some didn't. It's the risk you take, I think, with any staff person. So to me, it's making sure that you have the best support system in your organization that you can. And then I just have some information up here about just a few of the services we do: comprehensive community services, and we learned so much from the people we serve. We have a mental health drop-in center, and it was there that people just really were frustrated about the lack of options for folks that were homeless. And we were having a lot of folks coming to the drop-in center that were homeless, and they also had mental health and substance use issues. And it got us, we listened, and we wrote a grant. We wrote a grant both to start working with youth, and we wrote a grant to start working with folks that were homeless. So now we're a big player in the homeless. There's a coalition of homeless providers in the community that is phenomenal. We're just kicking butt in the city of La Crosse, and we're really benefit as an organization because we learned so much from them about how to approach different systems that are keeping people from being housed, permanently housed. And so we learn a lot. The thing is, those systems are really difficult. You can get really frustrated trying to deal with, like you said, public housing that might be archaic in their thoughts and in their processes and we found out here in La Crosse, it wasn't just folks with mental illness, but boy, if you weren't white, there's a really good chance you weren't going to get housing. And we have broke that barrier, but it's taken us 24 years to break that barrier with the Housing Authority here in La Crosse. So, and then the homeless folks have their mental health to me is way down the list. We need to make sure that they're getting the nutrition they need, that they're in a safe place if we can find a temporary place for them to live, and they need to get health care. And then we start to talk about whether it's a substance issue or a mental health issue, we start to talk about that once we've gotten some of the real basics taken care of. We also run the mental health drop-in center. That's my favorite place in the whole world to be. If I could sit over there every day, I'd be there. We have about 510 people used and this is in a town of 50,000. About 510 folks used the drop-in center last year. We're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. We have 3 nights we're open for groups, and every other Saturday we're open for a half a day. And if people would give us more money, we would be open 7 days a week, but and it would be used. But right now we can't do that financially. But the people that use the drop-in center pretty much run the drop-in center. They give us their priorities. They identify what they want for services there, what we need to provide. And it's so busy there, we have to have 2 staff on every shift. We do 2 4-hour shifts for 2 folks on each shift every day there. So,
Kathy, another thing that you do for the entire state of Wisconsin and working with
yes.
centers.
Yes. The pro contract?
Yep.
Yes.
You want to
We
talk
also,
about
yeah, you're starting to cut out. Can you guys hear me? We also provide statewide contract where we support other peer-run organizations, other mental health drop-in centers. And that's a state contract that we secured 6 years ago. Again, we just learned so much from folks. It's amazing. And a lot of those sites didn't start out using peer specialists, and that's our focus is to get peer specialists in their regions trained and have them be on the staff, whether they're volunteers or whether they're paid. So, yeah.
I just wanted to let you guys know we are getting close here. We have about 7 minutes left before we close. And so for folks on the lines, if you want to start pressing *# if you have any last questions, we can see you in the queue or typing them in the boxes here. And otherwise, I'll let you guys kind of start finishing out while we gather up our last session of questions.
And Kathy, I'm going to just, you didn't talk about it and I didn't either, but on the website is also what we call an employer toolkit.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
There's little assessments that you can start looking at. This was developed not just for ILCs, but for, it was kind of the core tool started, but we use that for other agencies that might be onboarding peer specialists. And kind of what you can do and some safeguards, and it also talks about supervision and support and a whole bunch of different things. I think that's, if you're looking at adding this type of a component, I think that there's some good information in there.
It's really good. This is the second version of it. We've gone through it a couple different times and upgraded it, and it's a good tool. I guess my biggest issue is that I sometimes have higher standards for centers than I do other organizations. I'm sorry. that I would expect that a lot of what other organizations don't even think about is that centers really already have it in place. So.
But again, I think.
And I'm really.
Point,
go ahead.
Point.
See?
I said it's a starting point.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And along with that, I just have one question from Rosemary, who's wondering, do you all know if this peer specialist certification is available is it available remotely, or do other states do it as well besides Wisconsin?
I can talk to that.
Some other, go ahead, Dee. Some other states do.
It's different in every state. For example, in Georgia, which was one of the early on with peer specialists or peer supporters, started training them, and they're all actually employees of the state.
Right.
They're employed by the state.
And then in Arizona has done it for a long time, but I don't think they have a state certification, do they?
I don't think so. They may now because they were looking at it. But I think the big thing is to just go into your Google search and say peer support or peer specialist and do your state and see what you come up with. There's a lot of resources and there's a lot of things out there. Or just contact, what kind of services are provided in your state and in your county. That will tell you a lot of information. They may not call them certified peer specialists. It may be mental health peer support, or they can have a variety of names.
Peer mentors, I've heard.
I think in most states that they're billing Medicaid, I think they're asking for a certification process. At least in CCS. That's the one program in Wisconsin that requires a certification. It all depends on the administrative rule around those programs.
Yeah.
Great. I just have one more question from the lines. Oh. Sorry, for some reason it's not letting me open them up here. Let me see if there's any others while I'm... Actually, go ahead and finish up, Kathy, and and Dee, and I'm going to try to get this participant's line up, and it logged out on me for some reason.
Yeah. Well, if anybody wants to call and talk about what we do here, it would be fine. I'll give Mary my number, and be patient. We're just incredibly busy here. It's one of the things that we are having a terrible time finding employees in Wisconsin. Our unemployment rate's under, what is it, Dee? Under 2.6% or something. And then in La Crosse, in our county that we're housed in, is under 2%. And so we're having a tough time finding employees. So,
Mary, you are posting our contact information, are you not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially, so I actually have not added that to our website just yet, but I will definitely throw that up there next. We do have all those other resources up there and currently available.
great.
And anybody who wants to call for me as well, I will try and help them find out what's going on in their state. I can make possibly some emails and some different things to find out what's going on peer-wise. So
Yeah. Dee, another state that I was thinking about, Minnesota, has a certification.
Yep, it's different than ours.
It's different than ours, but yeah,
It's
but
a
they
little
do have
bit
a
different,
certification.
but they do a lot of servicing of individuals with mental health and substance use as well, and they actually have a very unique, they actually train deaf peer specialists. They actually have a curriculum written for the deaf community.
Awesome.
Wow.
So I think I was just able to unmute our question from the floor. Can you go ahead?
Yeah, this is Bobby Becker from Montana. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can.
I can. Thank
Okay.
you. Yep.
Hi, Kathy. It's been a long time. I work
Yes, it has.
I work for Lyft, and I'm an independent living specialist, and Montana is also moving forward with a certified behavioral care support specialist, which is exciting. That we will actually get to help people because we live with our mental illness or substance use disorder. So Montana's on its way.
Good. Do you have a question? No. Okay.
I don't. I just wanted to let people know there was one question about the LACs. In Montana, we have local advisory councils, which is we report to our service area authorities and then work our way up to the Mental Health Oversight Advisory Council. And we, too, work with the state.
Great.
To provide our input and priorities to work on the housing and all the issues that we're dealing with here in Montana, too.
Great.
Yeah,
and you have unique challenges just with distance in Montana.
We do. We're the fourth largest state, and we're very rural, too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I apologize. I just want to make sure that I kind of start wrapping up so that folks know we're reaching the 2:30 mountain mark. I just wanted to say, while we still have folks on the line, how much I really appreciate Kathy and Dee joining with us today. This is, again, one of my favorite topics, and so I really would like for us to continue the conversation. Again, this was sponsored by the ILNet, and all of the follow-up from this call will be on the April website as well as the ILRU website, and we'll for sure get the contact info out for these amazingly intelligent ladies in Wisconsin. So that's our show.
Great.
Thank you
Thank you
so much.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thank you.